world. Welcome to Conversations with Rudy Rivera. Today, I'm thrilled to have as my guest Bob Wiesner. Bob is a partner in changeforce, and prior to that was the owner of the Artemis Corporation. Bob provides services to law firm on how to help them grow revenue, how to maintain client happiness, I guess, for lack of a better word, and how to really generate as much revenue as you can as a law firm in this competitive age. Bob, thank you for joining me. I'm happy you're here.
Well, thank you, Rudy, for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
But tell me a little bit what changeforce does, how it applies to law firms.
Sure. Changeforce is a consultancy that kind of specializes in helping professional services firms kind of overcome what we call points of friction, where they get stuck. In many cases, our clients are stuck in revenue generation. Either they're plateaued, they can't get any more revenue, seemingly, than they've been able to achieve. In some cases, it's going in the wrong direction. Our reason for being is to help them understand why it's happening, and often why it's happening is not exactly what they thought was the cause, and then apply corrective measures for them so that they can get past that sticking point and begin to grow again, and then get out of their way and let them carry on their business. We have other parts of our firm that work with leadership, with team building. But the primary, a big focus for Changeforce, and my primary focus, is on growth for professional services firms with a particular emphasis on the legal profession.
Well, Bob, you wrote a book called Winning is Better, which I've read twice already. Because even though it was not written originally for law firms, it applies to law firms. Because many lawyers, even me when I was a baby lawyer, thought, well, the law is not really a business. Practicing law is something different. Tell us just quickly what your book is about and where they can get it.
Well, the book is about the journey that a particular consultancy takes, a professional services firm, in realizing what's required to generate opportunities, become a leader among the contenders, and then close the business. Pardon me. So it's kind of a business fable, as one publisher describes it. It's just essentially like I said, it's the journey with lessons to be learned, and perhaps be adopted by firms that want to take it on. The title of the book is one that I'm particularly proud of and meaningful, because it came about, Rudy, from the many firms that we talk to, and this is especially true in law, who see business development and sales as a volume game, a quantity game, and they're perfectly willing. In fact, they are determined to get into as many opportunities, as many pitches as they possibly can, recognizing that their actual win rate, closing rate, is going to be relatively low. But that's okay for these firms, because that's where they believe new revenue comes from. What they're not thinking about, and we'll talk more about this, I'm sure, is all the times they're losing, all the frustration, all the wasted energy and wasted money, wasted billable hours that goes into the pursuit of opportunities that they don't win, or they never were going to win. Winning is better is a battle cry that suggests that you should be much more strategic, much more focused on what it takes to win an opportunity, that you should be more selective about choosing what you do pursue, and that you'd be looking for closing rates, for win rates, that are probably much higher than the firm's accustomed to. And that's when you realize that winning is better, and you're prepared to continue to take the steps to do that.
But why do so many law firms plateau financially when, there's such a greater need for legal services now?
Boy, that is frustrating. I think there are probably a number of different reasons, but I think the reason that many of them plateau is because they don't see the need or accept the responsibility of doing something differently. If you keep on doing what you're doing, you're going to keep on getting what you're getting. You're going to to plateau unless you begin to take some uh, truth serum and recognize what is it that I'm doing that's gotten me here, what works, what doesn't work, and if I want to get beyond the plateau, what different steps am I willing to take? If you're willing to do not a lot of different things, but maybe a couple of key things differently, you can break through and you can start to see growth that you did not before think was possible.
Well, I think you have to be selective about the work you want because you do not want to pigeon yourself
You have to be, yep.
in a category, and you do not want to take work, say, for less than what you're worth, just to hope that you're going to get other business. What I've learned is that if you're a lawyer that's not expensive, then that means you necessarily don't handle important things because you're not expensive. And so with clients, it's not always about price. It's about the result that you can provide them. And that's instilling, confidence. Um, but how does the law firm need to shift its mindset?
Well, first thing it probably has to do is accept the fact that growth is not correlated as closely as they think it is with quantity. In other words, it's a mindset shift to be willing to say no when you hear about somebody who wants to meet you or somebody who might be looking for a firm. Um, you need to establish within the firm what we call in the business qualifying criteria. What opportunities are actually worth pursuing according to some criteria that we establish that we believe is right for our firm. I have some ideas about what any firm should be thinking about, but you'll do the right thing for your particular firm. But just that ability, that willingness to say no, to say, we're not going to pursue everything. We're going to pursue where we believe we have a great chance of winning and where the outcome of winning is going to accrue that much more positively to the firm, both now and longer term. So that's the first mindset that I think is required. There's others, but we can pause there, see if there's any other questions or comments around that.
The flip side of that is that once they get the client and the client starts beating them up on fees, then the client no longer becomes profitable, but law firms are afraid to unload the client because, well, I may not get other work for it. And I've been a solo practitioner for a number of years, and I've turned away business when I felt that it wasn't enough for what I do. I remember a judge saying to me once when I was a young lawyer, I'd rather sit in my office doing nothing than not getting paid enough. And so when you look at the argument between somebody saying, just to use round numbers, I'll pay you $100 an hour, and that's the best you're going to get. And you got another client who's going to pay you $200 an hour. You're better off working on the $200 client and the $100 client. Now, the fear is, well, but what if I don't have that $200 client? But I'm a firm believer if you build it, they will come.
Sure, sure. Well, Jim Collins, I believe it was in his book, Good to Great, of a number of years ago, or maybe it was someone else. So forgive me if I misquote the source, but I do strongly believe in the lesson of this source, which is the not do list is more important than the to do list. When firms are willing to understand what pursuits are not worth it, what opportunities should not be invested in, then they open up the world of opportunity to invest and pursue the better opportunities, the ones that will bring them not just more revenue, but more profit and what we call quality revenue or sustainable revenue. So it's not about the just the quick bucks. It's about the longer term value of a client as well. When you calculate that out, you start to see opportunities to make much smarter decisions that track directly to the health of the firm.
How should the mind shift change then?
Well, the mind shift will change in a number of different ways, depending on where it starts. First of all, it's that idea that new business or business development does not require you to have the fattest possible pipeline, does not require you to talk to everybody all the time. Secondly, the mind shift changes because you accept that it's okay to say no. It's okay not to pursue everything. And for many professionals, that's actually a really hard, really high hurdle to overcome, but that's extremely important. Thirdly, a mind shift, and Rudy, you won't be surprised to hear me say this. You have to accept the fact that even though you're trained as a lawyer, you have to perform as a seller from time to time. We call them doer sellers. You're not a professional salesman. You're not selling pharmaceuticals. You're not selling Wi-Fi services. You are selling valuable professional services that help your clients succeed or keep them out of trouble. But you have to accept the fact that you have to sell. There's no lawyer that I've ever met who went into a legal practice because they wanted to be a salesman. Yet when you accept the fact that business development is part of your job responsibility, and it's not really a bad thing, it's actually an opportunity to provide clients with a solution. It's an opportunity to help them. Then you have the chance to actually see your revenue correlate very closely with your ability and your willingness to take on that business development role.
An observation that I have on that is that every touch point the law firm has with the client is a marketing opportunity. Because at any moment in that chain, you can lose the client. And
Oh,
so
for sure.
you can't take the mindset that I've already got the client, and as long as I do good work, that's all that matters. But clients are people, just like lawyers are people. And you have to realize that at any stage in the process, you can lose a client. It's important to keep that in mind. Every contact is a selling point. Every conference call is a selling point. Every meeting.
There's no question. And I want to say something that's going to cause some of our listeners to lose sleep tonight. I apologize in advance. But I believe that there's truth in this statement. Your best client is somebody else's number one prospect. So just because you've got them, and even just because you're doing good work for them, doesn't mean that they're not being occasionally or sometimes continually in touch with other firms, with other lawyers who want to take that business away from you. So if your attention is not properly allocated to your current clients, and you're not, and look, that this is besides the fact that you're doing good work, that you're fulfilling the obligations of your assignment, that you're handling the matter. If you're not showing more than that, someone else will. You've left the door wide open for a competitor to come in and take that business away from you. So it isn't just that you do good work at a fair price. It's that you go beyond that and continually go beyond that. And that's where you can protect yourself from the competition and set yourself up for growth with that client.
Exactly, because once you have the client, it's low-hanging fruit. A common mistake that I see lawyers make is that they assume the client is always going to stay. He's never going to leave. We've been working for 30 years with this client. We've got them locked. So they have a tendency to, almost like an unconscious bias, they have a tendency to kind of slack off a little bit with the client. I'll get back to them later. Oh, he's not going anywhere. Don't worry about it. And those, I think, are fatal mistakes that they make. And I've seen situations where a lawyer does good work, but the client is extremely aggravated with the way he or she is being treated.
Yeah, we've talked about that. That's a very real situation. But you know, there's another piece to that, Rudy, which is not as easily recognized, perhaps, which is that the attitude that a lot of lawyers have, similarly to you just described, I'm doing great work. I've handled the matter. So the lawyer now believes that the next time the client needs a lawyer to handle the next matter or the next opportunity, the next deal, they're going to call that lawyer. Now they probably will, they might, But if you haven't given that client the right level of attention, haven't had the right duty of care for them, then you've left yourself open to the other guys who have been talking to that client and are just waiting for the next opportunity to come in and perhaps compete for that business. So just sitting back and waiting for the phone to ring because you did good work is not a business development strategy.
It's not.
There's a Yeah.
Yeah, it's not. And winning the case is not business development strategy. Well, we won their case. Therefore, they're going to call us on every single thing. You constantly have to be in front of the client. You have to do the presence. One mistake I see that lawyers make frequently is that they tend to ignore a client after the case is over with, thinking, I'm never going to get any more business from them, so I don't need to return their call.
Oh, that pains my heart when
And
I hear that.
I've seen it happen. And I, for example, one thing I do is I will call a law firm and I don't tell them I've got a new case for you. I'll call them and say, "This is Rudy Rivera. Can you call me?" And sometimes I get a call back and sometimes I don't. And when I've seen this lawyer, I said, I called you. I had a case. Oh, I didn't know that. Well, obviously, if you would have called me back, you would have known about it. So I think, and you use the word, not being taken care of. I remember once I fired a lawyer because she wouldn't call me back. And so when asked why, I told her, and she said, "Well, I'm sorry you didn't get the attention you deserve." I said, "It's not about attention. I don't need a hug. I just need you to call me back." And I went on to another lawyer who did much better work. So it's that dynamic that I think outside counsel often ignore. But to defend outside counsel, because I was once outside counsel, you've only got so many hours in a day. So you have to be selective about what you do. Because the time that you spend marketing and doing business development, you can't bill for. But don't lose the business you have by doing stuff that you shouldn't do.
Yeah, there's a balancing act involved. And that's why for a lot of law firms and for a lot of lawyers looking at their own book of business, you realize that that giving attention to a client is important to maintain that client and to grow that client, but I cannot give the same level of attention to every single client that I have. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough energy. So that really means that you have to set priorities. It does not mean, as some lawyers seem to interpret, that I just won't give a lot of attention to anybody. But it does mean that I have to understand what's my A list, which are the clients that I can do great work for, who will pay me a good fee, and have growth opportunities associated with them, and which are the clients that don't qualify based on any of those three. In fact, there could be clients that, in the harsh light of reality, you realize this relationship was okay, but it's just never going to go anywhere. I'm never going to make enough money, and I'm never going to make the right profit on them. But one of the things that the astute firm is able to do is they actually know how to lop off the bottom 15 or 20% of their client business in order to preserve time and energy for both clients that they currently have that are worth investing in, as well as have time and energy and money to go find new clients who could actually be much more effective for them in the longer run. There's a certain joy. You probably feel this maybe more than others do, Rudy. There's a certain pleasure in firing a client, in recognizing the fact that I'm glad to have met you. I'm glad we worked this out for you, and I'm happy that the matter was resolved the way it was. And it's time for you to find a new firm. And what that allows me to do as the law firm is allows me to now invest the comparable amount of time to find a better client. And they are out there. They're definitely out there if you're willing to go look for them.
We've got a couple questions from our audience. One of them is, what about lawyers who are better at selling themselves and practicing law? And it's, you know what I mean. And that happens a lot in Mexico. And, once the deal's closed, they stop caring about the quality of their service.
Well, maybe I would bring that person onto my firm as a business developer, but not to practice law, for sure. That usually is as you said, Reed. That's usually a function of lawyers that overpromise, underdeliver, lawyers that may kind of lean more heavily into relationships without providing expertise. That and they're both equally as important, by the way, both relationships and expertise. So there's no real advantage to having a business development approach being um, kind of led by a lawyer with those qualifications, if you will.
And a big mistake I see that law firms do is they bring the face man in, the person who is the guy, got the charisma, but he doesn't bring in the people who are going to do the job.
Oh, and that's required now, but more and more by the decision makers, the GCs, the corporate counsels. They seem to be less and less impressed by the heavy hitters. They want to meet, who's my day to day per team, who's going to work on my business, who's going to solve my problem. And it may not be the best presenter in the firm, it may not be the most charismatic person in the firm, but they don't care. They want to meet the person who's actually going to do the day to day stuff.
But you, as the charismatic person, have to introduce this person so that from that moment on, the client can start having trust with that person and not just, I'm Rudy, I'm wonderful. And after the meeting, all of a sudden, there are these people working on your case that you've never met.
That bait and switch.
That's I think it's a big mistake. Bring everybody who is going to work on the case if you're doing a pitch to the client. And we'll talk about pitches a little later. Bob, in private practice, I was very firm about my fees. I was in a very specialized area of law, which was international adoptions, and people would call me and say, well, you're a little bit more expensive than some of the other people. Will you reduce your fee? I'd say, absolutely not. This is my fee. And well, why are you more? Well, because if there's a problem, I'm the one that's going to fix it. If they have a problem, they're going to hire somebody like me to fix it. And sometimes people would not want to sign up unless, certain things they wanted me to do for them. I said, no, I have a list of clients who has signed a contract, they paid, and they're waiting in line. So why should I put you over them? They've showed faith in me. You don't show any faith in me. So firing the client, as you say, is a good thing because generally the clients that complain about the fees are the ones that complain about the service,
Yeah.
are the ones that give you the most headaches. I had one instance where I opened an email when AOL was a thing at 9 o'clock at night. And I think I'll answer in the morning. The next morning, I got an email firing me because I didn't answer them at 9 o'clock at night. I said, good riddance.
Mm-hmm.
So you avoid those headaches. What are the revenue opportunities that most law firms overlook?
Uh, Interestingly, one that I want to talk about, which does not directly answer your question, but I think it's relevant,
Sure.
is the opportunity to earn the fee you want to earn on the projects that you're pitching. I think that a lot of firms leave money on the table
And how is
um,
that?
because they're reducing their fees too quickly. They're rolling over on the client. I spent a year or so as the executive marketing director at one of the big four accounting firms. All right, so this is audit, not law, but
Sure.
it's still
It's the
a
same concept.
professional.
The
It's
same
the
the
same
same
concept,
applies. Yeah.
and I can remember dozens of occasions where our audit team would go into pitch. They'd have a preliminary meeting with a client and come back with a proposal. Now, the proposal, this might be a publicly traded company that requires audits as regulated by the government. They'd come in and they would say, well, it's $1.3 million for us to do the required audit. Client would say, well, can you sharpen your pencils a little bit? And my firm would say, sure, come back a week later and it's $850,000. This is a true story. It went from $1.3 million to $850,000. How in the world did that happen? How did we reduce our fee by a third? And how are we going to make any money on it? Well, the rationale was, well, we're not going to win it at $1.3 million. We have to come way down. I said, well, so you want to lose money on it? That's fine. Okay, sure. Your bonus is involved in it. Oh, well, then let us charge more next year. We'll get them in the door, and next year we can raise our fees by another 10 or 15%. Well, that
You can
never
never go up.
happens.
You can
Never
never
happens.
go up once you're down. Once you go down. Go ahead. I'm
Right.
sorry.
No, no. I mean, you were thinking alike. So, one revenue opportunity I think that firms don't leverage enough is the opportunity to actually earn their fee. But they don't. Now, there's ways to do that. You have to provide a stronger relationship. You have to provide more market understanding, more client understanding. You have to show your competitive advantage, not just your client list, the number of cases you handled, but get deeper into understanding or helping the client understand how your business and their business actually align, how your expertise and their needs actually align. There's chapters in the book. I can't cover it in just a few minutes on this call that explain how to do a better job of justifying your value to a client. So, mission number one to increase your revenue or to find new revenue, let's put it that way, is to find more ways of earning your desired fees when faced with really good opportunities.
Usually what happens to the outside law firm, Bob, is that the client promises a lot more business if you do this, you know. And so it's one thing if you're going to be on a panel and and they're going to give you a lot of work and they're going to give you a volume. And there you may consider reducing 10% or something like that. But to reduce it significantly, I think makes it sound like you're desperate.
You act well. That's because you are, and the clients can smell that. It's like a shark smelling blood in the water. The foot in the door strategy is just it's a loser. It's a short term winner, but it's a long term loser. The idea that, well, if we get our foot in the door, we'll be fine. Now there's a variation of that which is equally as ineffective, but it's also kind of built off the same rationale, which is here as a firm, I know the best kind of work that I do. I know the kinds of cases that I handle or the kinds of problems that I solve that really bring value to the client. And that's the kind of work I really want to have. But here's a client coming to you and they're asking you for something else, something that's not your sweet spot, something that you cannot justify an hourly rate like you can for the really important matters that you handle. But it's a new client and it'll get our foot in the door. So you say, I'll come in, I'll take that work, I'll show them how good I am at it. And then I'll have the opportunity to pitch the kind of work I really want. So this isn't even a matter of raising the fee for the next kind of project. This is thinking that I'll get my foot in the door by taking on this outlier project, and that will put me into the right mix for the right project. It just doesn't happen as often as you think it does. What actually winds up in many cases is that you become pigeonholed, you become labeled as the firm that handles those outlying issues. And when the big ones come up, you're not the one they think of because you've already established your value based on that outlying project. So foot in the door, lower fees, not a really winning long-term strategy for growth.
And if you're doing your research as you should, then you should know what other firms are charging. And you should
Yeah.
know that your rates are competitive. So for somebody to come to you and say, well, just reduce your fee because you're already starting at a disadvantage because they already know that you're going to reduce your fees. Well, maybe after we get the hours, I'll get them to reduce it some more. I think it's a risk to the law firm, and most lawyers don't want to take that risk of losing business. But I believe in the long run, if you stick to your guns and hold firm on what you do well and what your fees are, and that's what you're going to charge, then honestly, let them go someplace else. Now, you might think, some of my audience might think, well, it's easy for you to say you're in-house counsel and you buy services, but I was outside counsel for 20 plus years before I became in-house. And I practiced that because I felt that I had a skill set that was worth something. And, somebody shouldn't tell me what I should charge. I remember one client coming to me saying, I need you to do this work, but I tell you what, I'll buy all the books and you do the work. I said, no, I'll send you a bill, you pay me, and I'll buy the books. And I never saw them. And those are the best kinds of clients that you say, goodbye, I'll see you later. So this gets to my next question, Bob, and that's about, you know, firms thinking differently about pricing, value, and profitability. And
Yes.
you touch on it periodically, but what does it take for you to make money? And you know, go ahead.
No, I was going to say clearly, on the one hand, and the obvious one is that it comes down, a big part of that is just charging the right fees. You already should have a handle on what is the right hourly rate for you to be charging, um, for you to generate the right profit margins that your firm requires. So that number should be understood by any lawyer that's looking to bring in new business to the firm. I think what is much rarely measured, but also affects profitability, is the time required to acquire the client. Are you actually measuring the number of hours that you are, as a lawyer, or including your associates, and if you're fortunate enough to have a business development person or team, now how much time are you investing in order to acquire that client? We've done analysis of law firms over the years, and we have found that firms that grow their business, have six figures, in some cases seven figures of new revenue, actually have lost money when they calculate the time invested in selling, if you will, or the time invested in business development. Um, and it's not just how much effort it took to win that piece of business that they won. It's how much other business they pursued that they did not win that is a cost to the firm. You can find that your firm's entire bottom line will improve if you are more selective and more efficient in all of your business development activities. Rudy, if you're a high value prospect for me and I really want to acquire you, then I probably shouldn't even be counting the hours that I invest in getting to know you, in understanding your business, and having you understand and get to know me. Because once I capture your business, it should be quite clear that it was a good investment. But in order to do that and be profitable, I have to no longer pursue all the noise, all the junky opportunities, all the low value opportunities that come my way. Um, First of all, many of them I'll never win anyway because I don't really qualify or the field is too busy. Others of them, I have to invest just as much time to win a crappy client as I have to invest to win a good client. And that chews up my bottom line. So I can generate revenue at a higher profit level if I'm smarter and more strategic and much more efficient in how I choose to allocate my business development time.
Well, in the business world, market share does not mean profitability.
Exactly.
And so the fact that the firm makes a profit at the end of the year does not mean that they couldn't be more profitable when you subtract. If you would add the time that they spend doing all these bids, the profit would be more. I think it's difficult for firms to see that. It- but I think the firms are also have to be strategic about the client they're going to pitch to. So, for example, if it's a bet the farm situation, fees aren't going to matter. What's going to matter is, do they trust you enough to do the job? And oftentimes I see firms going into a presentation being braggadocious about what they do and how great they are, where I want to know if I can trust them. That's my first concern. So what are you going to do in that first 5 minutes, maybe even 10, to show that I can trust you? That's the key. Once you got that, then I think you'll find that negotiating with your fees will happen less and less. But I have to trust you. And oftentimes these presentations made by these law firms are just really slick slide decks. They don't sit down and talk to the client, tell me what your needs are. I remember my grandmother used to say, God gave you two ears and one mouth. Use your ears more.
Yeah.
So the pitch should be, tell me about your case, tell me why it's important to you. And there's no excuse nowadays for not doing a ton of research on your prospect because information is out there that you can pick up in minutes with AI. And that's a subject for another topic.
Yeah. There's a lot of work that's been done around trust. What are the elements of it? What raises it? What lowers it? Um, and it's even more of a factor now in the last 3 or 4 years since COVID, when we don't have the opportunity anymore to meet people face to face as much as we used to. We don't have coffee with everybody. We don't walk the halls of our clients, not tapping on doors and just speaking to people. So it's become more difficult to establish trust, but it doesn't mean trust is less important. One of the very interesting factors, and I think every firm listening to us, Rudy, can assess this for themselves. Um, an interesting factor that correlates, or actually has an inverse correlation to trust, inverse correlation, is the concept of self-orientation. In other words, if a client invites a firm to come and talk to them, and all the firm does in the first, you mentioned it quite accurately, the first 10 minutes is talk about themselves, show slick slides about how big they are, the experience of the lawyers, the number of offices they have, the client list they have, and so on. The client will consider that firm to be self-oriented, to be much more interested in talking about themselves than they are in talking about or understanding the client. That is a critical area that then is reflected in how well I trust you. Now, contrast that to the firm that walks in the first 10 minutes and says, we think we understand what you're facing. Let's talk about this. What we have some insights into cases like this, and into your business. Maybe you're a retailer. Maybe you're an IT company. Maybe you provide services to multinational companies. Let's talk about what we know about that. Let's talk about the challenges that a company like yours, Mr. and Mrs. Client, is facing when you're in that business. That first 10 minutes is now what's called other oriented or client oriented. And that is directly correlated with the likelihood you'll be viewed as a trustworthy partner to them. So every firm on this call can take a look at their last 5 pitch decks and count up how many pages they went through before they got to talking about the client. And I don't mean just parroting back, reciting back what the RFP, if there was one, requested. I mean really showing an understanding and a care for what the client is facing. Were you self-oriented? Were you other-oriented? That will translate to trust, and that will translate to the likelihood that you're going to win that business at a revenue level, at an hourly billing rate that will make you very happy.
It's why it's important for that to be at the beginning to establish that trust. Once you establish that trust, then I think there'll be less of trying to negotiate the fees. So, something I think that outside counsel should do also, and asking their counterpart. Now, it depends who their in-house person is. Is he a lawyer? Is he a CFO? Is some other non-lawyer? You have to address the situation according to your contact with the company. So, in the claims world, they're all lawyers pretty much that handle the claims. So you speak the same language. But if you're talking to the CFO just wants to know the bottom line, and you have to understand that, right? A business unit leader may not is not going to know the legal jargon. So you have to adapt your presentation accordingly. But I think the message that outside counsel should send is, I'm just saying it bluntly, what do I need to do to make you look good? Okay. What is it about this case that makes you lose sleep? And how can I help you sleep better? I remember telling one lawyer once, I was joking with him. I said, you need to coddle me like a newborn baby. I need to feel safe and secure. Of course, I'm being comical about it, but I think that's an important message for the firm to deliver. What can I do to make your job easier?
Right. And part of that, Rudy, and I 1000% endorse it. Let me give you actually a nuanced version of that, is showing that you understand their business issues, not only their legal issues. You have to show you understand that, but that you also understand their business issues, and that you care about those business issues. And this is relevant even if you're pitching to inside counsel, but it's even more relevant when you're pitching to business owners, CEOs, CMOs, chief operating officers. I mean, they go home at night and they're not thinking about necessarily only about the law firm, unless they're in the middle of a major matter, but they're thinking about their business. They're thinking about all the pressures they're under, their shareholders, their customers, their revenue, their own profit. They want to work with any outside provider, lawyer, accountant, advertising agency, architectural firm that shows an understanding of what those issues are and recognizes the importance of those issues. In fact, you can go, when appropriate, you can go so far as to show that you are not just understanding of it, but you are sympathetic to it, and you're endorsing the factors that will make the company more successful. In other words, I don't just want to solve the legal issue for you. I want to, and I will, but I also want to be your trusted advisor. I want to be your business advisor. Remember when we had phones on our desks, Rudy, back in the day, and they had speed dials on them?
What's a phone?
What's a phone?
Remember
Yeah,
the Seinfeld episode when they were fighting about what number are you on the speed dial?
exactly right. Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to be on that speed dial,
Uh-huh.
and not just somebody in the Rolodex that they look up when they have a legal issue. I want to be one of those 10. I want to be in the first column at the very least, and I want you to call me whenever there's something going on. It doesn't even have to be legal, because you trust my wisdom, you trust my experience, you know that I understand the market, the business that you're in. And if I have an issue that only is tangentially related to the law, I'm still motivated to want to share it with you and hear your opinion about it. That's what lawyers should be aspiring to from the very first meeting that they have, not to dodge the initial legal requirement or issue, but to go there and beyond. That's how you differentiate yourself. That's how you separate yourself from the competition. That's how you justify your fees And that's how you win quality revenue.
I agree wholeheartedly. And one thing you should never do in that interview is mention your competition.
Hmm.
'Cause whether you mention them in a positive way or a negative way, the meeting is about you and what you can do, not comparing yourself to somebody else. When I see that happen, I see an insecurity with the law firm doing the presentation. It appears that they're insecure. They may not be insecure, but that's the impression I get. And I'm more interested. Tell me about what you can do. I'm already talking to other law firms, but I want to know what you can do. Don't compare yourself. And that's a common mistake I see.
It's really unnecessary, but I have to say that it's actually brought on by clients in many cases. They put you in that situation. I'm sure all of us on this call have gotten the question, "What makes you better?" or "What makes you different?" And both of those answers are begging you to provide a competitive comparison, which, and I agree with you, Rudy, which rarely turns into a winning message for you. What I always tell my clients, always, is that when you're asked the question, "What makes you better or what makes you different?" the answer is this, and your listeners can write it down. I don't know what makes us better or different. Depends on who you're working with, depends on what the situation is. But I do know what makes us relevant for what you're facing. And let me talk to that relevance right now. And that gives you a chance to go through your experience, your insights, your understanding of their market, your understanding of their challenges. Um, Let them tell you whether or not you are different. I guarantee you that you will prove to be different because you'll be the only firm competing for the business that will have chosen to answer the question this way. And you will have shown a true understanding of what really matters to them. They're not looking for a firm that's different. They're looking for a firm that's, first of all, relevant, and second of all, effective. And you can put those two things together in one answer and separate yourself from the competition without having to name the competition.
Let's repeat it again for our audience. What is the answer?
The answer is I cannot tell you what makes us better or what makes us different. There are too many factors out there, and we don't know who all the firms you're talking to or you have experience with. But we can tell you this. We can tell you what makes us relevant for you, for what you're facing legally, and for the business that you're in. We can tell you what makes us relevant, and that's what we go through.
I think those are great pearls of wisdom. What I've suggested that people say with that is I really can't comment on what other firms do because I don't know who you're talking to, but I can tell you this is what we can do for you. And this is what we will devote to doing for you. This is what we plan on doing, and this is how we're going to do our strategy. I think when a client asks you that, I think they're just baiting you to see what they're going to say. And I don't think somebody should fall into that trap. I personally never ask that question. I never ask what makes you better than the other firm because if I'm talking to the other firms, I know what they're doing. I want them to tell me what they can do, the people I'm talking to right then and there. That's what I want.
Yep, I'm down with that. Every firm should take a look at their website. How are you describing yourself? We are a firm of seasoned professionals who understand the challenges you're facing. We are a firm of 50 lawyers or 20 lawyers or 5 lawyers who have a collective 1,000 years of experience. You can take any name of a firm and slap it on any website, and it would be equally true for all those firms. You can't separate yourself based on things like that. You separate yourself based on what you understand, not what you know about the law, but what you understand about the importance of what you do for the client's well-being, what you understand about the client's business. If you went on to the websites of a big four accounting firm, Deloitte, KPMG, etc., the first things you're going to see are going to be insights that they have. You're not going to see the history of the firm or who the lead partners are or where their offices are. And the next thing you're going to see is you're going to see industry expertise. They'll probably have a menu item that's called industry served. And you can click on it, and you'll get automotive and energy and aerospace and retail and so on. Um, that's how clients think. They do that because it's effective. Because what clients are looking for are people who understand their business. They know you're an expert in the law. They know you went to law school. They know you have a JD. They know that you've handled cases. They know you're a partner. And so is everybody else. So is everybody else. What they want to know is, what do you know about them? What do you know about their business? What do you know about their challenges? That's where you're going to build a relationship from, and that's where you're going to ultimately get quality revenue from.
Well, I think the website is important, but not as important as the presentation.
Mhm.
Because all the website does, all LinkedIn does is just talk about your credentials. And yes, I agree with you. You need to specify what industries you're in. You need to talk about this experience you have. And they're going to check that anyway. So there's no point in going into that. There's no point in going in with a large PowerPoint deck unless you want to say after the presentation, and by the way, so you don't have to Google us on YouTube or wherever. This is something for future reading down the road, but never should be the basis of your presentation. So I think, the one big takeaway, that's probably the biggest takeaway we have here is how you answer that question. I would also say that the lawyer has to learn to be a salesperson and to be able to connect and be able to tell a story and communicate. Just because you talk does not mean you can communicate. And part of the communication factor is listening. So my idea of an interview, somebody coming in, say, "Hey, my name is Rudy Rivera. And thank you for this opportunity. I understand something about your situation, but I'd like to learn more about it. I'd like to ask you some more questions. I think we're in a position to help you. But let's discuss about your situation. I want to know what's important to you about this particular case." And then you start from there. The key is to get them talking and not you doing all the talking.
There is a relationship that you could map if you bothered to. Um, it becomes quantitative, where you can actually calculate how much time in a meeting did we talk and how much time in a meeting did they talk. And if you did that over 10 meetings, I bet you'd find that the meetings where they talked more than us, or at least the meetings that were at the top of the list in terms of how much they talked, had a higher percentage of wins than the meetings where you did the talking or you talked more than they did. I'm certain that just about every firm represented on this call would would find out the same thing. Now, interestingly, if you use a note taking uh, program like Gemini or Fireflies or any number of them now that automatically take notes um, from your meetings, then you would actually be able to find out very easily what percentage of time did you talk, and what percentage of time did they talk, and you could be able to link that to whether or not you won. Um, I challenge firms to go ahead and do that research and see if we're not onto it when we say that the more they talk, the better the chances are that you're going to win.
Bob, there are a number of people in our Zoom audience who are Mexican lawyers. And I just want to emphasize the concept is the same. People want to work with people they trust. People want to feel that they can trust you as a lawyer. I remember saying to one law firm once, you have many clients. I have one job, and your duty is to protect me, to make me look good so that my CEO or whoever doesn't say, "How did you hire this idiot?"
That's pervasive. That's true.
And just to mention quickly, the big law firm mentality is people hire the lawyer. On some occasions, they hire a big law firm where they're looking for a case with that has a lot of bandwidth. There are multiple disciplines, and sometimes it's good to keep them in-house. But people are going to hire the lawyer, the person they like, and the person they trust. And where that is evident is where lawyers leave a firm and the clients follow.
Yeah.
They're tied to the lawyer, not the client, not the firm.
Same in every profession, whether it's accounting or advertising or architecture. Um, if people really believe in and have trust of that service provider, they'll follow them anywhere. And it's you can argue if you're the managing partner of the firm that we want that client to feel that way about our firm, not about any one lawyer, but that's just not how human beings work. Um, so recognizing that that's going to be the case, let's leverage that and let's build the tightest relationship that we can. It's up to the managing partner of the firm, the owner of the firm, to try to figure out how to keep that lawyer there because that will keep the client there.
Exactly, exactly. Well, we're getting close to our end time. I put your email there, Bob Wiesner at changeforce.ai. If anyone wants to email you directly from who's on Zoom, feel free to email him for more pearls of wisdom. I am going to sign off with my LinkedIn audience. Thank you very much for attending. It's been a pleasure as always.
And Rudy, I'll interrupt your sign off just real quick. Connect with me on LinkedIn as well because you'll never get any sales messages from us, but we do publish quite a lot of these little pearls, as you call it, including some white papers that we started publishing at the beginning of the year. And if you connect with me on LinkedIn and request the white papers, be very happy to send them to you. There's never a charge for that.
Well, thank you, Bob.